I have watched the silent killer of pornography disrupt men and women and marriages and home lives. And it's why I love partnering with Covenant Eyes. They're not just a partner in this podcast. I personally use them as a shield against the nonsense of our day. And they have generously offered 30 days free to use this technology as a shield against the onslaught of pornography in our lives. You can get this 30 days for free by going to covenanteyes.com/overcomers. I pray that you would seriously take advantage of this opportunity. Hey, and welcome back to this episode of The Overcomers. I've invited two friends to join me, Colleen and Searcy, who I've known for 25 years, like predates my time at the Village. Her and her husband, Wes. Wes was actually an elder at the Village Church, and then Ryan Wester, who I've known for 2 years. And here's what I want to talk about today. I just want to talk about women in ministry. But if you're like a theologian, you're getting really excited right now. I'm not wanting to argue for complementarianism versus egalitarian. TBC is happily complementarian and a place where women flourish and thrive. So if you're clicking on this hoping to hear kind of a theological discussion on women in ministry, I think you're going to be disappointed. But in the show notes, because I know some of you need this, in the show notes, I put our short form and long form papers on women in ministry. And so long form is our exegetical work. Short form is kind of how we operate at TBC. But what I wanted you two to share, one, because I'm a huge fan of Jesus in both of you, I wanted to just kind of share about coming to know Jesus and then feeling this call to serve his people and the wrestle that is. And then I think we'll kind of jump in from there on maybe some nuance around that. And I also like that, Colleen, you're a bit ahead of the game than Ryan. I mean, you're several years.
Older. You're being very kind.
I'm trying to be careful.
I embrace it. I'm older than
great.
Ryan.
Yeah. Listen. Yeah, very much so. And so anyway, welcome to the Overcomers.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah,
no, pumped. And are you nervous about this, you guys?
I mean, I was, but I'm feeling really good about it.
Okay,
now.
Good. Is it because if you say something, it lives in perpetuity and it could be brought back upon you?
Absolutely. You nailed it right there.
Well,
yes.
I know.
I'm entrusting these words to the universe is what's happening here.
Let's
and that
entrust
feels a
them to
little
the Lord.
scary. Yes.
We'll entrust them to the Lord and know that's a possibility, but it'll be fine. So I'd love just kind of short version of your testimony. You have very different testimonies too. Yes. I don't know if you've caught it, but very different testimonies. And then from there, I might have some follow-up questions. And then I'd love to kind of talk about when you start getting that, oh man, I think he might be calling me into serving his people in a unique way. Yeah. So why don't we start there? Colleen, you want to start us?
Sure. I'll start. I have that boring testimony that you say from the pulpit.
Yeah.
That I pray over my kids.
Yeah.
That we all want for our kids.
I'm thankful for that. I used to be embarrassed about it, and I'm not anymore, but grew up with godly Christian parents that told me about Jesus and grew up in church. My grandfather, I love to brag on my grandfather. He was a Presbyterian minister.
Let's go.
And when I placed my faith in Jesus at 10 years old at a Christian camp, I came home, told my parents, told my grandfather, and he baptized me, taught me the Apostles' Creed, like taught it to me.
Okay.
It didn't just memorize it. So I was discipled by my Presbyterian minister grandfather.
With the Apostles' Creed.
I mean, I really can't explain how grateful I am for that. And he was one of the most joyful men I've ever known. And he loved the scriptures.
Yeah.
And so my grandfather, when I was 10, would talk to me seriously about the scriptures and engage me about the Bible. And He's a big part of my story because he would talk to me not as a little girl, but as a follower of Jesus.
Come on, like a disciple.
Yeah. And so it's a big part of my story. But I came to know Jesus at a Christian camp at 10. Just he opened my eyes to that I was a sinner, that I wasn't a Christian because my parents were, because of my preacher grandfather, that I was a sinner and that I needed his grace.
Come on.
And I feel super grateful for that. Do you want me to keep going? Do you just want my testimony?
Yeah, I think that's
right
great.
now?
I think that's a beautiful story.
Okay, I'll tell you the rest later.
Ryan, you are a bit of a different story.
A little bit different, yeah. Ma'am, I love hearing those stories though, and that doesn't sound boring at all to have your grandfather teach you the Apostles' Creed.
With joy.
With joy.
I mean, a Presbyterian Apostle Creed joy. We're already tearing down all sorts of stereotypes.
I wish y'all could know him. I wish he drove a moped. I'm just saying.
Dang it. I feel like I missed
Goals
out now.
for life. Yes. No, my story is just different. But gosh, I've teared up so many times this past week just recounting all the ways the Lord has been faithful and the themes of his sovereignty. I grew up in a pretty dysfunctional home. My parents informally split when I was 9. They didn't even get their lives together enough to divorce until I was 18. That was kind of the dysfunction that I lived in. There was a lot of substance abuse. There was just absentee parents. And I was always a very strong-willed child. But it wasn't until I got old enough to be angry at my parents that really kind of took a destructive turn. Up until like middle school, my parents had put us all in sports at a really young age, so I was just busy all the time with sports and activities. But around middle school, everything just started turning towards, wait, this isn't how this is supposed to be. Yeah. My parents aren't supposed to treat me like this. This isn't how life was supposed to be. And that just turned into a lot of anger and resentment. So I have a unique story in that I lived an incredibly destructive life, but I wasn't the victim to that. I was usually the instigator of that. Like it was always like purposeful. It wasn't like I was the person going like, oh, they talked me into going to the party or they talked me into these things. It was always like mindful of my choices. I just didn't care. And that led to just a ton of apathy going into college. I have a very distinct memory right after I graduated high school, pulling up to my house, sitting in my car, and just feeling like, gosh, this is supposed to be like the most exciting time in my life. And I'm like borderline depressed and I hate everything about my life. Why is that? And I remember this clear as day, thought about a few of my friends from like my sports teams who all loved Jesus and thought about how happy and joyful they were to be going to college. And in that moment, I thought to myself, it's because I didn't choose that God life.
Yeah.
Like I didn't choose that.
The God life.
Really, that was really my understanding of it. I grew up in Fort Worth, Texas, and never had anybody share the full gospel with me.
That's wild.
Not once. Yes. I honestly think it was because I probably was very intimidating until like I always presented incredibly confident and sure of myself.
Sure.
Even whenever I was so insecure and broken on the inside. So I'm sure most people were like, not even going to try.
That would probably go bad for me, so I'm going to leave her alone.
I'm sure. Yes.
Sure.
So no fault of anyone, but just truly, I didn't know the gospel story. And in my mind, in that conversation in my car, leading up with the most recent horrific decision I'd ever made, I started tracing back all these awful things that I had done. Man, Satan had such a tight grip on me in that moment that I just came to the conclusion at 18 that I was a bad person. And I never disbelieved in God. I always assumed there had to be something greater than this, but just went, I missed out. I didn't choose that. And so I went to college really broken, really, really broken, but refused to let anybody else know. I was still going to be the life of the party. I was still going to crush whatever goals I had and all the things. But man, the Lord in his kindness and grace, it was kind of wild. The summer after my freshman year of college, which was, the darkest year of my life was my freshman year of college. The summer after, I had a little bit of a cancer scare on just an annual checkup at the doctor. By the grace of God, it wound up being just a scare, but it was followed by several appointments of having to go in every few weeks, and to the point where we were going like, I don't know if I'm going to go back in the fall because I may have to be having potential like reproductive removal surgery, like things like that. But my last biopsy that they did came back clear, but that just scared me.
Yeah.
That scared me because in my mind I went, well, if I believe there's a God, there has to be some type of afterlife here, and if I'm a bad person, that means that there's not a good thing coming for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I it's comical now, but I decided to clean up my act, but not for religious reasons.
Okay.
I was genuinely trying to prolong the inevitable, is what I was thinking. Like, if I keep living this way, I'm only going to speed up potentially dying with how reckless I was living. So I befriended a girl that lived 2 dorms down, and I knew her because she was always the DD for all my friends the year before.
Okay.
And I knew
that's designated driver for,
yes,
I don't know.
For all of you incredibly holy people, that is designated driver. So befriended her, and I didn't know this, but she worked for her church in the preschool ministry as like, I would come to know later, kind of like outreach. They would hire college girls to be like the extra people in the kids' classrooms, just to help out with stuff. They were a phenomenal church that also did full-blown curriculum all the way down to the infants, but they always hired out extra hands to make sure they didn't have to turn kids away.
Mm-hmm.
And she did that on the weekends, and through a series of events, she talked me into doing that with her. And I do mean like talked me into, because I was not, when the first time she asked me, I laughed and was like, that place will burn down if I walk in. And she was so sweet and naive that she thought I was like genuinely joking. But yes, God loved me and saw me through that. And it took about 6 weeks of sitting in that 5-year-old classroom and hearing the gospel for the first time in the most childlike way that the Lord saved me.
Come on.
It was one of their requirements that if you were working, you had to attend one of the services because they had 3. And I would purposefully sit behind this family. And I got to know them later. I got to disciple one of their daughters later.
So fun.
But I would find them and sit right behind them and almost kind of act like I was part of their family every Sunday. And I didn't have terms or words for any of it because I had never grown up in church. So I didn't know what Reformed was. I didn't know what salvation was. So it took me a while to be able to articulate my story.
Mm-hmm.
But something had changed dramatically. So in my sophomore year of college, God very graciously and sovereignly, plucked me out of all of it.
Men, let me start by talking to you. We are called to lead and to love and to serve our wives, our kids, in our churches. And the reality is that we are in a battle, and one of the most subversive, awful weapons that the enemy has formed against us is the weapon of pornography. Maybe you're hearing me say these things and you're not a man at all. You're a woman. And the data is showing that women are struggling more and more with pornography. Also, this is one of those attacks that no longer is seen male or female, old or young. We will not drift towards holiness. We must fight for it. Too much is at stake. If you go to covenanteyes.com, you can use the promo code OVERCOMERS, and that gets you 30 free days to put this on your phone, to put this on your computer, to put this on your devices, that you might see the help that God has given you in these days against this weapon for the good of your own soul, the good of your family, the good of your community, and the good of your church. Visit covenanteyes.com/overcomers. Man, I just want to talk about preaching the gospel to 5-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
and
you can get me on a soapbox.
Let's not let our lead foot be the moral law or moralism.
Yes.
Let's let the lead foot be the nature and character of
Yes.
God.
Yeah, God wants to talk to you.
Yeah.
Like it was, I found myself praying for those kids, and then I went, oh, I'm praying. Who am I praying to? It just sent me down this whole path of like, oh, no. If I think that this is for them, then it has to be true for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And so now from there, now we've got these 2 very different stories, which is so the Lord.
Yeah.
And yet.
And friends.
Yeah.
Friends.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you've got learning the Apostles' Creed in Scripture from a joyful Presbyterian pastor, and you've got
That's funny
some
to me
sort
to
of
see.
reformed kindergarten class where Ryan gets snatched out of the muck and the mire.
Yeah.
And so talk a little bit about Colleen, like your 10-year-old and then now let's fast forward to when I met you, you're 24. You're married to a youth pastor at a very large church in Denver, with a youth group that was, how many high schools were represented in that youth group? I think it was like
a lot,
like
because we were
20-something,
downtown
30-something,
church. Yeah, so we had a lot of high schools represented.
And so in some ways, you're the young wife of the student minister.
Mm-hmm.
When did you start? Had you already got a sense that? So I don't think I said this, but Colleen is the women's director at the Village Church, and Ryan is the home groups director at the Village Church. And so, when did you start going, oh man, I kind of have a gift here to teach the Bible? Was it earlier than that?
No.
Was it, okay.
No, I actually, so when you met me, I had probably just graduated from college, and my degree's in biology, and I was a high school teacher. I knew I loved students and I loved to teach. So I was teaching high school biology and helping Wes in student ministry and loving it. And so he began asking me, hey, do you want to write this for our students? Do you want to write this for our leaders? And I loved it. While I'm teaching high school students.
Did Wes pay you for that, or is it shared checking account?
It was joint checking. But also at our church in Denver, my pastor's wife, Kathy Litton, was a phenomenal Bible teacher, and she taught our young married Sunday school class. And I had never heard a woman teach the scriptures like Kathy.
This if like that church.
Yeah.
Like exegetical, verse by verse exposition of God's word every Sunday.
It was incredible.
And so my guess is that trickled all the way down.
It did.
And so you got to sit in and hear that, marvel at that gift.
Yes, I did. And then that was when Beth Moore's video-driven Bible studies came on the scene, and Kathy facilitated some of those. So I have these two women that I'm sitting under their teaching. Rick Ferguson was the pastor at Riverside at the time, incredible teacher. And I'm teaching high school and getting a front row seat to all different kinds of learning styles and building reps on how to present difficult information, because biology is not a super easy subject. And God is just kindling this love for the scriptures at the same time. And I was just taking baby steps as a student pastor's wife. I'll disciple the middle school girls. I see leadership in these three. I'll have them over to our house and disciple them. And that's how discipling women and teaching the Bible started. I would say, in hindsight, so I'll just say it, I'm in my 50s. In hindsight, looking back, I hadn't really recognized this until recently, but just in whatever situation I was in, whether it's teaching high school, whatever church I was in, whatever season of life I was in, I was creating and finding opportunities to either disciple 2 or 3 women or teach whoever wanted to come. Yeah. And it looked different all the time. And I really, when I stepped into the Village, and I got to lead a Bible study at the Village in the Martin building.
Let's go.
And that was the first time just getting feedback. Yeah. And women, it grew. Like the Bible study grew, and women kept coming. And that's when I started to go, I really, really want to do this. Yeah.
I love that.
Full time.
And in all honesty, if you can disciple middle schoolers, you can disciple anyone.
You can captivate them and disciple.
If you can do that, you can lead middle schoolers into a love for the Word of God and to live out their faith through obedience to the Word. I just think that plays out across all age groups. I think somebody wrote a book years ago, it's all student ministry or something like that, and I thought, that's actually not far from the truth. Mm-hmm. And now Ryan, so now we're coming from a whole different place. We, Presbyterian, Apostles' Creed, Joy, Reformed kindergarten.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about your own discipleship, your own growth in the knowledge of God's Word, and then maybe give us 1 or 2 tipping points where you're like, oh, wait, I think the Lord's gifted me for this.
Yeah, absolutely. So that whole first year was really precarious because, like I said, I didn't have language for what was happening. And it became a running joke later because I came on staff at that church. But I had to have lied my way into that position to even be in that classroom. I'm serious.
No, I believe you.
They weren't like
They're
crazy.
like, let's hire this party girl to train our kindergartners.
Yes. My wonderful boss for a long time, anytime I would say something cheeky, he'd be like, should we go pull out your original file so I can find a way to fire you? Because once they hired me for the preschool stuff, I just never left is what happened. But that whole first year, I did a lot of hiding because I was confused. Like, who's safe to tell?
Yeah.
I did not come from a loving, nurturing home, nor did I have a lot of stable relationships. So even like deep friendship was foreign to me on like, oh, we can really trust each other with all the hard things. So did a lot of hiding, and by a wild turn of events, wound up working at a church camp that summer. I would go to the BSM's lunches on campus. The Baptist Student Ministry would do free lunches. Started tipping my way into like the college ministry environment just by doing that. I was like, okay, this can be like my first entry point. And one day somebody came and spoke, was trying to recruit college kids to come work. And that was my first experience that I can look back and know that the Holy Spirit was like prompting me to say yes to something, because I couldn't describe it. I just knew like, I'm supposed to say yes to this. I don't know what I'm doing this summer, but I guess I'm doing this. So it was there that the camp director, Ty was wonderful. He knew nothing about my shady past or any of those things. Yeah. He just knew the person that showed up that was eager to learn, loved Jesus so much. I was so sold out. As soon as I realized that Jesus actually wanted me, it was like everything was trash.
Yeah.
It's like, I just didn't know. Yeah. I just didn't know that it was a possibility for me.
Yeah.
And so it was a 180. I was a sponge soaking everything up, and he wound up asking me to lead all the other girl staff members in a Bible study for the summer. And like any confident person, I said yes, and then went, I don't know what I'm doing. So it forced me to spend all of my extra time in the Word, because I took it very seriously. Like anything, and that has marked my life. That's something that I learned later, that even the things before I knew Jesus, because I really struggled with, well, wait, if I was this before Jesus, does that mean I still can use these things after? Or does that mean like, oh, now that I'm a Christian, everything
You're
about
talking
me
about
before,
like your personality type?
My personality type, my gift, things that I knew I was good at. Does that mean that those were bad because I didn't know Jesus then? I struggled with a lot of that.
Yeah.
But I've always strived to do anything that's been given to me with excellence. So I was like, no, if you've asked me to do this, I'm going to do this well. And the Lord used that whole summer for me to go like, hey, I got a taste for what actual community looked like and what it looked like to actually be in community with people. So as soon as I came back, I went all in. I was like, no, whatever space is available for me at this church, I want to be in it. And the tipping points have really been being invited into things.
Okay.
Mine's different on like, I didn't go seeking out things. It was just, I couldn't help but be in these places. It was like, I wanted to position myself in any place where I was going to get more of Jesus. Yeah. And I wanted to serve. I wanted to be there. I wanted to be in every Bible study. I wanted to be discipled. If a woman was willing to go to coffee with me that was older, I wanted to be there, all of those things. And there were several men and women that just in different times, like listened to the Lord and said, hey, I feel like you should, try and do this. Or, hey, I would love if you would join me in this. And so those were really just the markers of being invited into things. Within a year of that, I wound up being asked to take over. We had an on-campus ministry tied to our church, and they asked me to be the president over it within like a year of being really involved in the ministry. And then that led to them asking me to come on as an intern for the youth ministry. Okay. They had a really robust youth internship, and it was wonderful. And then that led to them asking me to come on full-time staff for college and youth.
Okay.
But it really wasn't like, oh, I have this career path trajectory. It was, yes. The answer was always, oh my gosh, yes, Lord. Yes, Lord. I just want to serve you.
Yeah.
So it took a long time to kind of figure out, hey, what am I actually passionate about? What am I actually gifted in? Because it was just, I just wanted to be
everywhere.
I loved all of it. All of it.
Was there a moment where it started to maybe kind of develop in your mind? So, we'll talk, you call to ministry.
Yeah.
Was there, so yes, you're being invited in, but did you have that moment where you woke up and you're like, oh man, this might be what God's asking me to give my life to?
I did because I was in college and I was doing a sociology degree thinking that I was either going to do something like social work, or honestly, I had this like huge dream to do the Peace Corps.
Okay.
I was down for just jetting after college and bye, see y'all later. I'm going to go hang out with other people in other cultures and stuff, because that is something that was already imprinted on my heart, was a love for different people and different cultures. So as I was like thinking about like, what does this look like? I was getting further and further into leadership opportunities, and was just a part of all the different areas of our church. And anytime someone would ask me like, hey, what do you want to do after college? My answers started getting confused. Like, oh, well, I thought it was this, but it didn't feel right to say those answers anymore. And my college pastor at the time was wonderful in guiding this. I was talking to my husband about this yesterday, because it was like one of those, it felt so insignificant at the time, but clearly like the Lord used that so much. He gave me one of those tiny little like quick reads, Is God Calling Me? It was just a little black and green book. I still have it. And he encouraged me because he was my college pastor, but I was also his associate. So I was associate to both the youth and the college pastor, and just split my time. And he was like, hey, you should have a solid answer for that when people ask you, are you called to ministry? Because I would kind of like shy away from it. I'm like, oh, I don't know. And I know now it was a lot of just insecurities, because how could a girl like me be called to full-time ministry?
Sure.
So I read that book and walked with my college pastor and two of the women that were discipling at the time, and just kind of asked a lot of questions. And man, just in my heart of hearts knew that, yes, I felt called to ministry, and specifically to Jesus' bride, the local church. It was helpful to put some language around like, no, I don't feel called specifically to college ministry or youth ministry. It was, man, I feel called to making Jesus' bride beautiful and getting as many people in this as possible. And my mentors affirmed it. And it was just really sweet to have multiple people indwelt by the Holy Spirit helping discern along with me, and just be confident in that and start answering confidently. I feel called to ministry. I feel called to do this full time.
So were there, I've heard from many women that upon that call, and then, okay, what does it look like to live that call? There was the internal struggle with it, especially for women who land on the complementarity side of the theological debate. So then you got the internal, what does it look like to be obedient to the scriptures?
Yeah.
And then some opposition externally for well-meaning, maybe.
Yeah.
Well-meaning people who maybe have a different theological view, and then create opposition for you to step fully into your gift, even under the regardless of where you land on that debate. We've settled that at TBC. We know it. But did you face that kind of opposition? Were there moments where the wind was like knocked out of your sails? Do you want to talk a little bit about that first, Colleen?
Yeah. Man, I grew up a kid in the 70s, teenager in the late 80s and 90s, and I did feel called to ministry as a sophomore in college. And what I interpreted that as was, I'll be a pastor's wife.
Okay.
Because that's all
degree,
the Mrs.
the MRS.
And I knew I wanted to be a high school teacher at the time. That's what I thought I would do forever. And I had this weird, I feel called to ministry. Well, that's got to mean I'm going to marry a pastor, because wasn't even necessarily handed down from my parents. My parents have always been so encouraging to me in ministry. That's just what you were taught. That was in the church, and so it took a long time before I kind of went, I think I'm a Bible teacher.
Yeah.
And it was Wes, we still laugh about this. It was one of the times he asked me to write time with the Lord curriculum for camp for the students. And I handed him this exegetical sermon on salt and light. And he read through it, and he was like, he didn't know how to break it to me.
Yeah.
He was like, so this is really good. It's a bit much. It's a bit
exceptional,
it's
however.
a bit much for,
Thanks for writing my next sermon for me. Thank you.
But he was the one that goes, hey, but this shows me something. And, so there was an internal wrestle of, I feel like I'm supposed to do this. Like, I'm actually supposed to teach the Bible, not only be married to somebody who teaches the Bible. And there weren't a lot of models out there for me at the time. And so I just kind of stuffed it for a while and just dealt with it internally on my own. And the Lord kept surfacing that. It was hard to find opportunities to grow as a Bible teacher. And while married to a minister, like it sounds like it would go hand in hand, but he wasn't the senior pastor. So I had to kind of look for those opportunities, and even not nuclear family, but even extended family, telling me that's not what women do. Women, that women don't stand on a stage and teach exegetically. And so, there was a lot of wrestle with that.
Yeah.
I am a very naturally submissive person.
Yeah.
I love that
I was not born courageous and confident. And so for me to deal with that, I feel the Lord calling me to teach the Bible, and I'm going to cross some line. So how do I obey Jesus and not cross that line that women aren't supposed to cross? That was tough.
Yeah. And I love, obviously, I love your husband. He was an elder at the Village Church for a long chunk of time. And so I love how he's called that out in you, recognized, championed,
He has
created space.
He is your biggest fan.
For a guy that's
so
as active in ministry as he is, to always try to go, how do I create space for you? How do I champion this gift I see so clearly in you? What a gift. What a gift he's been.
It is a gift.
Yeah,
truly.
like if he was a different kind of man, that could have been squashed or squelched, especially
quickly,
because of your personality. Right?
Truly,
It is. Since 1970, the marriage rates in the U.S. have declined by close to 65%. This means that fewer people are actually getting married, and those who are married are finding marriage to be terribly difficult, leading to an epidemic of divorces. Now, what if I told you there was a massive nationwide study that was put on by the Barna Group and Communio that showed a direct correlation between marriage decline and church decline? Communio is not another program per se. They are a nonprofit organization that comes alongside churches to help them engage in their context, in their city, in their suburb, in their rural area, with the hopes of strengthening the idea of marriage, strengthening marriage. They are evangelistic. They are deeply serious about discipleship, and they work with the church. And so I'm grateful that Communio is sponsoring this season of The Overcomers. For more information, visit communio.org/overcomers, communio.org/overcomers. Ryan, what about you? Any wind snatched out of your sails? It sounds so far like you're in this place where the men in particular is like, we see this gift, let me give you this opportunity.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons I was nervous to come on here, because, man, I have a different experience. But being able to look back on everything, it was definitely sprinkled and riddled with all these little nuances to that. But I just didn't recognize them at the time.
Yeah.
It isn't until I kind of dissect some conversations or some culture things that I can now recognize. Because even looking back at my time in college at that wonderful, wonderful church, at the time there really weren't any female staff members that were in actual leadership positions. There was a ton of females that were in administrative positions or secretarial positions, and then all the rest of us were in college or youth.
Yeah.
So there are even things there that I just didn't know to recognize at the time, because all the lanes that I was running in, I didn't hit any road bumps or roadblocks for people to go oh, should she? I do have this weird memory, though, of one time our college pastor was late to our college gathering. And when since I was over all of it, they were like, oh, why don't you get up and do something? And I was like, can I do that? I really, because
Yeah.
I was such a sponge and took everything. So, I mean, I devoured the scriptures and had such a deep love and reverence for the scriptures that I actually, like, I looked to one of my good guy friends who grew up in the church, knew his Bible backwards and forwards, and I was like, can I do that?
Is that legal?
Is that, and I genuinely asked. So I had like little
Yeah.
memories of that.
Yeah.
So clearly there was something in there where I was like just aware, but again, didn't grow up in the church to have any type of like reference or baggage in that regard. It wasn't until later I really resonate with the opportunities, because I always felt really clear on how the Lord had gifted me and wired me, and had no desire to make a career out of my calling. So part of my story is being out in San Angelo for college and moving back to Fort Worth because of my mom. I accepted a full-time position at that church and was loving it and loved everything about it. And then felt this stirring from the Lord to come back home. And that was really hard because I was leaving, kind of like my dream job.
Yeah.
But my mom, I didn't know it at the time, but was quickly going to come out of remission from breast cancer. And so the Lord called me back to Fort Worth. So I did the next best thing, which was go to seminary.
Okay.
I was like, well, if I'm going to move back to Fort Worth, I guess I'm going to go to seminary.
It's right
But
there.
that was, I went Southwestern for a hot minute. And my now husband and I were already dating, and he was interning for youth ministry at his church. And so coming here was like, well, I feel called to ministry. I'm coming here. The church that my husband was at, just in their bylaws wouldn't have had a place for me.
Yeah.
So that was my first taste and introduction to like, oh, where do I fit in here?
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I'm just going to serve my little heart out. I'm going to serve in the youth. I'm going to do what I know to do. And, if there's not a place for me here vocationally, that sucks, but I'm just going to be faithful and obedient to what I've been given here. But yeah, moving back to Fort Worth was like the first time that I actually got hit with the culture of like, oh, women have limitations in the church. But it was just a long process and journey of trying to figure out, okay, well, if you've given me these giftings and these passions, but specifically for the local church, I'm just going to serve where you have me and just, hope and pray for opportunities to get to do this in a more full-time capacity.
Yeah. What would this probably needs to be answered by you, Ryan, because Colleen's the women's director, but you as the group's director, like talk to us a bit about healthy collaboration with men.
Oh my goodness. That's one of my
ministry.
favorite things to
Yeah,
talk
because
about.
you are surrounded by men in that department. And so talk a little bit about, okay, here you are. You're a very strong, gifted woman who's leading. What does it look like healthy collaboration? I mean, I know Justin's right there with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can't talk about that without talking about my experience at the church plant that I was at in Fort Worth. So prior to coming to the village, helped with an Acts 29 church plant in West Fort Worth, was part of the core planting team, and then got asked to come on staff not long after we planted. The sweetest brothers I could have ever asked for are the elders of that church.
I love that.
And they let out so well on what it looked like to have healthy brotherly and sisterly affection for one another and to champion each other. And so it was a sweet gift to work at a church plant because there was 3 of us on staff.
Yeah. Yep.
3 of us on staff. So we weren't.
Which is awesome for a church plant.
Which was awesome for, well, we didn't start there.
Yeah, sure.
It was awesome for a church plant, but they weren't just my elders, they were my brothers.
Yeah.
They were genuinely my brothers, and they were my biggest champions, always. And they always made room for me at the table, and I lost count the amount of times that they genuinely made space on purpose for my voice to be heard, to be championed, and for it to be clear to the congregation that they uplifted and upheld the value of women's voices and opinions and experiences and how they made decisions.
Yeah.
So that brotherly and sisterly affection and love for one another was key to that. And that being the sole focus. So the men on my team are phenomenal, and they are like brothers to me because we create a culture of honor where we're honoring one another. And seeing each other first and foremost through that lens, even before like, oh, hey, we're coworkers for sure.
Man, I love that. If there are women now, well, there are watching this who, man, they're either they have one of your stories or they're somewhere in the middle between your 2 stories, and they're beginning to discern, oh man, I think the Lord might have a call on my life to serve the bride in this capacity or that capacity. How would you both speak some courage into them and maybe hand them a little bit of advice for whatever season they might be in, which is impossible, but I'm just going to trust that the Holy Spirit will kind of use your words to land on specific women out there now.
And I would say just start afraid. Like, I just know so many women.
That's advice regardless of sex, but yes.
Okay, well, that's true. But
there are unique challenges for women in ministry that are different.
You mentioned just a minute ago, did you have some times where the wind was knocked out of your sails? And certainly there were those, but there have been times where, and it's been men who put the wind in the sails and create opportunity. And so, our friend J.R. Vassar, he took some hits when he brought me on staff and invited me into spaces and ways to lead. And I was afraid, I had never led in those ways before. And so, one of my favorite quotes about courage is, courage is being afraid and saddling up anyway. Yeah. And that's one of the biggest things I just tell women is you're going to feel afraid as you step out to do ministry, whether you're leading in co-ed spaces or teaching the Bible, or it's just going to feel uncomfortable, and do it anyway.
Sure.
And then I would say grab a mentor, find someone who is doing what it is you long to do, and take them to coffee and ask them a gazillion questions. Ask them, how did you start? What advice would you give me? I think those are two starting points. Grab a mentor and just be comfortable with how uncomfortable you feel, and just keep taking steps forward.
I love it. Ryan, would you add anything there?
Yeah, I think one of the things that has been really sweet to just reflect on is, the Lord honoring just faithful obedience.
Yeah.
Again, I didn't go seeking out a ministry career or anything like that. And I was kind of confused for a while on what does this look like? Because even now, having the privilege to oversee our groups ministry, it wasn't 10 years ago I said, you know what I want to do with my life?
Oversee groups.
I want to oversee groups at the Village Church.
Yeah.
No, I got really clear on what I was passionate about and earnestly sought the Lord's face on how can I do this with where you have me now?
Yeah.
What does this look like here? And I know that's not everybody's story. Some women are in places where, like I said, I was at a church for a while where by bylaws, I never would have been put in this position. So I want to be sensitive to that, but the Lord sees you, and He's the one that gave you those gifts.
That's right.
That's the thing that's been carrying me through all these years, is that these were given to me for the building up of the body.
Yeah.
Not for me, not for my own glorification, but for God's glory, and just being faithful with whether it's a little that I've been given today or a lot tomorrow.
Yeah.
And seeking out opportunities in your everyday moments to live out those giftings and passions.
I love it. So I kind of always wrap up an episode by asking this question. Right now, men and women listening to this conversation, who knows where they are? They're on a treadmill, they're in their car, they're in their office at home. I don't know. They're somewhere. If you could just give a final thought to either men or women in this, maybe you would have a word of encouragement for how men can speak life into, provide opportunity for, encourage in a real way, or maybe the Spirit's putting on your heart, I want to say this to women who might be listening. What might those words be?
My first thought is for pastors.
Okay. Talk to us, Colleen.
I think Ryan and I both have said it was men that said, I see this in you. I'm going to create opportunity for you to begin leading. And I just wonder if pastors know how encouraging it is to a woman to have their pastor, an effective leader, to go, I see this in you, and I'm entrusting this to you. And we'll even get creative about ways for you to lead here. I just would love to say that to the men listening. Husbands, brothers, it doesn't have to be a pastor for a man, I'm saying this too because I have two sons, right? So I'm the only girl in my house. And one of the ways that I just love that the men in my house bear the image of God among the many is they're protective, and they would use their physical strength and the authority that they have in a heartbeat for my good. And so when men step in and do that and go, I see this in you, I want to give you the courage that perhaps you lack and the permission you're seeking. I see this in you, go lead. That it changes everything.
I love that.
Yeah, it truly does. And just to add on to that same theme, because that was one of the things that I was talking to my husband about earlier today, is that I was so grateful and forever changed by the fact that the men around me didn't treat me as something to be afraid of. And in our friendship and in our ministry, they treated me like an actual sister. Not, oh, well, since she's a female, either A, I can't have a close relationship with her, or B, we have to be careful, or C, we have to have limitations for her. I never felt that in the spaces that I've been able to lead in, and it meant the world. It meant the absolute world. And part of my story of feeling like an orphan and then coming into a spiritual family, we were called to be a family. We are the family of God, and living that out in a way that is so much more beautiful to the world around us. And remembering that we've been all given the ministry of reconciliation. That's what we're doing, whether we're women in ministry, men in ministry. Gosh, if that's always supreme to us, it's going to be a good day at the end of the day.
I agree. Man, I would just add as we close out here that in 33 years of ministry, 23 of it here at the Village, the spiritual gifts, wisdom, and callings on women are needed and necessary for men to flourish. So it's not just, if the body's going to flourish in all the ways that God intends for it to, then you can't cut off half or more than half of the spiritual gifts and leadership skills in your congregation. And I'm a happy complementarian. I know that God has set boundaries that are in beautiful places. But if those boundaries kind of diminish or undermine the work of the Spirit in, like I said, in most cases, 60% of your congregation, then I think you're robbing the people, the men and the women and the children of that congregation from some really beautiful things that God intends to do. And so thank you both for how you lead, how you teach, how you engage in a very feminine way, but fierce, holding on to the scriptures and leading and serving with great courage. We are a better, stronger community of faith because of your presence at TVC. I just feel like God has blessed us with you two in real unique ways and powerful ways. And so thank you. Thank you for how you serve our body, for where my wife gets fueled and encouraged through your teaching and encouragement of her and her gifts. And then, man, I love watching you lead, Ryan. Just again, there's such strength in you. And I would hate, I'd hate that strong women can get put in certain categories, and you're not, like, your leadership gift isn't usurping, it's a leadership given by God. And he said that I'm calling her to this. And so thank you for your courage and leading so well and beautifully in a very large part of our organization. And so thank you both.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
It's an honor, absolute honor.
Love it. Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning in to The Overcomers. I just pray your heart is always encouraged in the Lord. Really, the ministry I feel God's called me to in this season is to be one that's encouraging you, telling you the Lord sees you, reminding you of the opportunities that we have as the people of God in this day. And so the Overcomers podcast is one of the ways I do that. Another way is that I'm sending out a monthly newsletter, and in that I've got a little audio link for kind of things I'm thinking about and wrestling through that I'm not necessarily preaching on. And so in the show notes is a link where you can go and sign up for that monthly email. And so, man, if the Overcomers is encouraging you, I would encourage you then to click on that link, sign up for the newsletter. And it's a way for me to further encourage you as you seek to live as overcomers in this current moment.